And watch what you've got coming up, because my goodness, the general election starts here. It starts on Britain's election channel. It's going to be on GB News for the next 6 weeks. Patrick, looking forward to your show. And my goodness, what a day it has been. The first day of the general election campaign. It's only going to get tighter. It's only going to get more dramatic. My name's Tom Harwood. Patrick Christys is up next. But before all of that, let's get a latest update on the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It's been a very wet day for many of us today, and the rain is going to continue for many parts as we go overnight. All this unsettled weather is in association with an area of low pressure that is gradually making its way northwestwards, but it's progressing pretty slowly. And the rain, as a result, is going to linger across many northern parts of the UK as we go through this evening and overnight. It's going to be heavy and persistent for many parts, which is why we're going to continue to see rainfall totals building up, leading to some issues. Temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount because of the unsettled weather, even in the south where it's going to be largely dry, likely to stay in double digits. As we go through tomorrow then, a bit of a north-south split. Across northern parts it is going to be wet, and we'll see rain through the morning too. The rain doesn't look like it will be as heavy as through today, but because of the high rainfall totals we've seen recently, there could be some further issues, making flooding a little bit worse in some places. Also heavy rain across parts of eastern Northern Ireland, northern England and North Wales in particular. Like I said, some further ongoing issues, some more disruption to travel possible. A drier story further south, quite cloudy through the morning, though I am expecting some bright or sunny spells to develop as we head into the afternoon, particularly across parts of East Anglia and South East England. Here there's a good chance of seeing some sunshine, and in the sunshine here it should feel pleasantly warm. Temperatures likely to peak just about in the low 20s towards the southeast. Further north and west, where you have the rain, temperatures will be suppressed, some places staying in single digits, and watch out for some blustery winds towards the northwest. As we look towards Friday, and there will still be some further outbreaks of rain, especially across northern parts, though these look fairly light, and there will be some dry spells in between. Further south, likely to stay mostly dry, and there may even be some bright or sunny spells developing. Saturday looks set to be the driest and sunniest day of the weekend, before a bit more rain on Sunday for many. See you later.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys, and it's on.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
Sir Keir Starmer hits back immediately.
Tonight, the Prime Minister has finally announced the next general election, a moment the country needs and has been waiting for.
Ed Davey shouts into the void.
This government is out of touch, it's out of excuses, and it's out of time.
And Richard Tice launches reforms campaign from a hotel room.
Only reform UK's common sense policies that can now save Britain.
But could Nigel Farage put the cat amongst the pigeons by running?
Reform will fight the election. As for what I do, I'll think about it overnight.
Here's who you're voting for, OK? Look at these front benchers from the Tories and from Labour. Who do you trust to run the country? We've dropped all the brakes tonight. We are rolling with this, and we will be going live to Downing Street with our political editor, Christopher Hope. There he is, the man himself. And on my panel tonight, it's the crack team with the director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, activist and landlord, Adam Brooks, and author and journalist, Rebecca Reid. Oh, yes. And the most annoying man in the world got lifted.
Fascists! This is not law!
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Get your popcorn ready, sit down and don't move for 2 hours. Next.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has addressed the first Tory campaign rally after confirming a 4th of July general election. In a statement outside Downing Street today, Rishi Sunak made the surprise announcement and urged the nation to stick with him over Sir Keir Starmer. Addressing Tory party supporters and his cabinet at London's Excel Centre a short while ago, he took aim at the Labour leader.
On the 5th of July, either Keir Starmer or I will be Prime Minister. And he has shown time and time again that he will take the easy way out and do anything to get power. If he was happy to abandon all the promises that he made to become Labour leader once he got the job, how can you know that he wouldn't do exactly the same thing if he were to become Prime Minister? We Conservatives have got a clear plan, with bold action, to secure our future. So let's take that message and that vision of a secure future to every corner of our United Kingdom, and let's show Labour that the British people will never be taken for granted.
Meanwhile, the Labour leader, Keir Starmer, responded to the announcement, saying the election is the moment the country's been waiting for.
Tonight, the Prime Minister has finally announced the next general election, a moment the country needs and has been waiting for.
And Liberal Democrats leader Sir Ed Davey vowed to remove the Tories from power.
Across the country, people are crying out for change, and this election is the chance to make that happen. In so many parts of the country, it's the Liberal Democrats who can beat the Conservatives, who've taken people for granted.
In other news, UK inflation has fallen to the lowest level in nearly 3 years in April. Driven by lower gas and electricity prices, the latest figures show inflation dropped to 2.3% last month. One person has died in a mudslide on the edge of the North Yorkshire moors as rain continues to batter the UK. It happened at Carlton in Cleveland at around 1:30 this afternoon. North Yorkshire Police have asked the public to avoid the area. And former sub-postmaster Alan Bates has said he has no sympathy for Paula Reynolds after she broke down twice during her first day of evidence to the Horizon IT inquiry. The former post office boss at the centre of the scandal admitted making mistakes during her time in charge, but she insists she didn't know about the Horizon system when she joined and that no one had told her of any bugs. She's also denied any conspiracy to cover up the scandal. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Patrick.
Good evening, folks. It's Wednesday, the 22nd of May, and it's happening. It started with Twitter rumours. There's a lack of denial from Number 10, and usually reliable government sources going underground sent Westminster into a frenzy. Then David Cameron failed to attend a meeting with the Albanians, a massive blow for the Albanian government, who had rolled out a welcome mat, including a giant poster of him on a building in their capital. Then Sunak was asked about it at PMQs.
Mr. Speaker, speculation is rife, so I think the public deserve a clear answer to a simple question. Does the Prime Minister intend to call a summer general election, or is he feared?
Aye. Mr. Speaker, as I have said repeatedly to him, there is, Mr. Speaker, spoiler alert, there is going to be a general election in the second half of this year.
Then, for about 20 minutes, it all became about Jeremy Hunt quitting. They say that he'll lose his seat anyway. He hasn't got any money for tax cuts, so he's off. And we were about to get a cabinet reshuffle. Then it swung back round to being all about a general election again. There was an emergency cabinet meeting at 4:15 p.m. last week. Rishi Sunak said, book your summer holidays. We're going for autumn.
Got a holiday booked then, so you need to let me know.
Do come back and tell us when the election is, and we'll be delighted to have you with us then. November. Thank you very much.
Book your holiday.
Book your holidays, he said. But as the afternoon progressed, one date emerged. July the 4th. And it was all eyes on Downing Street. And then out came the plinth. Yes, there we go. And then all eyes on the Downing Street door after that, wasn't it? And out strides Rishi Sunak into the pouring rain to remind us all immediately about the time this government locked us down and smashed our economy to pieces.
I introduced the furlough scheme I did so not because I saw a country simply in need of desperate help, albeit we were, but because I saw a country whose future hung in the balance. I have never and will never leave the people of this country to face the darkest of days alone. And you know that because you've seen it. As I did then, I will forever do everything in my power to provide you with the strongest possible protection I can.
No one in Downing Street thought to provide Mr Sunak with an umbrella as he got soaked to the bone. Then the music started and his message to the nation was drowned out.
Prices will ease and mortgage rates will come down. This is proof that the plan and priorities I set out are working. I recognise that it has not always been easy.
Things can only get wetter, eh, Rishi? Finally, the Prime Minister got to the important bit.
Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request.
But there was a stark comparison between Socky Sunak and Slick Starmer, who looked more prepared and Prime Ministerial than the Prime Minister.
Tonight, the Prime Minister has finally announced the next general election, a moment the country needs and has been waiting for.
So here we go. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has gone for it. The general election will be on July the 4th, and we go now to Downing Street with our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, has Rishi played a blinder or has he got this all wrong?
Well, time will tell, won't it, Patrick? And good evening from Downing Street, where Jeremy Hunt has just arrived back from this fundraiser the PM has been in charge of over in East London. The election starts today. It has caught virtually everybody, apart from a few people around the Prime Minister, completely unawares. I was talking with a member of the Whip's office earlier tonight. They told their flock, their 24 MPs or so, there'll be an election in November. I've been told for ages it'll be in November because that's when it makes sense, because by then you may have had some cuts in interest rates, maybe 2 of those from the MPC, the Monetary Policy Committee. By then inflation's down to well under or around 2%. Net migration falls, Patrick. Illegal migration may start to tick down. Even you might have tax cuts announced by the Chancellor in a fiscal moment in September. All those levers the PM has chosen not to pull. Instead, he's gone for an election that no one was expecting in the pouring rain. And the campaigning starts tomorrow. Tory MPs are cross. At least one letter has gone in, or a letter of no confidence in the Prime Minister tonight. They tell me there's a chance they can depose the Prime Minister as leader of the party before next Thursday, when Parliament is dissolved. I think the jury is out on that. I think the chance of that happening is slim, very slim, but that gives you an indication of the fury of a lot of Tory MPs tonight. The ones speaking to me just don't understand why he's gone for an election now when he didn't have to. Why not wait 6 months and see if all those things that might happen have happened, and then further doubts emerge about Sir Keir Starmer? Instead, the PM has gone for an election that no one expected.
Yeah, look, Christopher, thank you very, very much for keeping us bang up to date all day there. Just one more... Oh, it's all right. Let's get the thoughts of my panel this evening. We've got the Director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Mark, I will start with you on this. What a calamitous way to announce a general election in the driving rain with Steve Bray and his massive megaphone shouting at you.
Yeah, he sort of came across as the little kid in the playground who said, come on then, I'll take you all on. You've got to kind of, you know, it's quite courageous in a way. Whether it's completely wise, I'm unsure of. Chris went through some of the reasons that he might have waited until November or possibly even later. But I'm not sure much would have changed. The one thing that Chris didn't point out is oftentimes when a government's in trouble and thinking about whether to go early or late, some of it is what's going to happen to the economy, what do we think is going to happen to inflation, but some of it's just crossing your fingers and hoping for a black swan event, you know, that something will come out of thin air that changes the polls. He's decided that's not very likely, so it's game on. I've never known a government that is 15 or 20% behind in the opinion polls to trigger an early election. It's without precedent.
Well, you've mentioned the opinion polls, and we've got a few of them that we can actually show you very shortly here now. So the latest opinion polls for Rishi Sunak are actually pretty dire, actually. He is, if we have a look at this, voting intention, Labour 43, the Conservatives 26, 6, the Lib Dems on 10 there, Reform on 9, and the Greens on 5, and the SNP on 3. So that is the latest polling data from Savanta. Adam, I'll throw it over to you now. Do you think that Rishi Sunak can do anything between now and the 4th of July to change what we're seeing on our screens there?
No, I think they will narrow slightly. I think the polls are always sort of wrong in some way, but no, they're finished. And, you know, it was maybe 2 years ago when I was on this channel saying if you get rid of Boris, there's going to be severe trouble for the Conservative Party. I always said, better the devil you know. They got rid of the UK's only superstar politician, someone that could walk down any street, his haters would go up and get a picture with him. You know, we haven't got many of those in this country. Boris was that man. Rishi is a disaster. He's you know, they're going to get annihilated.
And Rebecca, there was an issue, a massive issue, I think, with the professionalism of both of those announcements. Given that Rishi Sunak was the one who was deciding when to call the election and how to do it, his team, his crack team of advisors, yes, that was crack, decided that they were going to have him outside in the pouring rain with Steve Bray with a megaphone next to him as well, playing a load of music. In fact, I can show you exactly what went on here with that guy that you were hearing blaring a load of music. He's kind of an international annoyance, this guy. Here he is.
Are you proud of yourselves, boys and fascists? This is not law! This is not law! This is not law! Specifically to do this to this man. There is a long established constitutional rule against particular law. Long established. This country has fallen to fascism.
So you've got a guy in the shape of Rishi Sunak who's getting drizzled on. You've got all that going on Downing Street. They couldn't organise an umbrella. They couldn't stop the protesters shouting as well. We've got a little side-by-side for you of this now, and I'll put this to you, Rebecca. Rishi Sunak there, absolutely soaking wet on Downing Street. Keir Starmer inside. You know, you can't see them in this video. A couple of Union Jacks next to him, nice and dry. Difference in professionalism.
So I have a semi-conspiracy theory about this. And I think it's that if you have ever watched a film where there's like a sports match, if you want people to side for one team, you start them as the loser and then you see them come back up. And my theory is, I don't think they can be stupid enough to have sent him out without an umbrella. So all I can imagine is that they want him to have had the worst possible start so that then, in the 6 weeks, which we're going to have, we have a very short attention span, the news cycle flips around a lot. In theory, maybe this is done so that he can actually only get better, literally like the music was saying.
No, they are that stupid. And I've said it numerous times. The people that are advising our MPs, some of them are extremely stupid and they've let the MPs down.
Yeah, but
I'm pretty sure it was cock-up, not conspiracy. Because, again...
But what does that say, Mark? I'm sorry, but seriously, what does that say? He can pick and choose when the next election is. Yep. He's already up against it. We've just shown you the polls there, and he's got the ability to make that decision. He caught everyone by surprise. David Cameron was dragged back. We didn't quite make it to Albania, but, you know, he's dragged back from there. There's all this speculation going, and he's on the steps of Downing Street, and he's in there ruining a nice suit.
Yeah, he can probably afford a new suit, I'm guessing. But, no, you're right. I mean, what one might say in his defence is I suspect that the number of people who knew this for certain at lunchtime today numbered about 3 or 4. So usually for an announcement of this significance, you'd have a communications team planning it out weeks in advance, working out who was going to be standing to the left of him, to the right of him, and all of the rest of it. It's not really a snap election, is it? The government's been in office for 4.5 years, but it was a snap decision to do it, and it came a little bit unstuck
But
through
you
the
not
optics.
think maybe there was an element of him looking for pathos there? That it was a very sort of humble way to announce it. Maybe he's trying to engender sympathy.
But the rain could not have been organised by
But they could have said, you know what, actually, let's not do it like that, or let's give him an umbrella.
Did he know that there was a coup to dethrone him in the next few days? Has he been panicked into this decision? You know, was there a move to install another leader of the Conservative Party? That is probably more likely for me.
Or
why would he do this?
Equally,
Why?
it's well held that he might want to move to America, and American schools start in August, and he might want his kids in situ to start school in August.
That would be a very cynical reason to dissolve Parliament.
I think if I knew I was going to leave, I'd be like, well,
let's have a little look at some of the things, the state of play when it comes to the timing of Rishi Sunak's election. OK, so we've had inflation now is at its lowest for nearly 3 years. The visa dependents are down. OK, so that has happened. We're expecting the net migration figures to be lower tomorrow, mainly because they couldn't really get any higher. Otherwise, we'd all have a newcomer all around us everywhere we go. So they're going to go down as well. Flights to Rwanda, he thinks, will take off in the first week of July. That could coincide with this election if he plays his cards right on that. The European Union, or a variety of different member states, have now come out and said they are going to copy the Rwanda plan. Meanwhile, this week, Labour have basically said they're going to make it easier to change gender, which means essentially more blokes in women's changing rooms, and also they, and I'm paraphrasing here, would quite like to make an enemy of Israel by the looks of things. Good timing.
Well, you could say good timing. Here's my conspiracy thoughts for what they're worth. Firstly, I suspect you might be right. The Rwanda plan might get a plane or two off the ground. It's possible. But I think he might have reached the conclusion it's not going to have any discernible impact between now and November. So you might as well just get the optics, if there are going to be any now. But he's not anticipating that the small boats won't be coming over the channel over the summer, which would be bad optics for him. Second consideration may have been Reform UK have not yet got their act together. They've been promising, for as long as anyone will listen, that they're going to field 650 candidates. I think they've only got a few dozen in place. We'll hear from Nigel Farage, I think, tomorrow, whether he's going to run or not. But it's going to be quite difficult for Reform to actually slot in place 600 candidates. That's quite helpful to the Conservatives. If you'd given Reform till November, I think they could have been more up and running.
Well, look, just on that, we're going to park it there for now. A reminder to that, we are expecting an announcement at 11 a.m. tomorrow from Reform UK. It is expected that at that announcement, Nigel Farage will decide whether or not he is going to actually run. So make sure that you watch this space, because we'll bring it to you here first on GB News. But look, I wanted to play you a little bit of how Sir Keir Starmer delivered his first speech after this general election was called.
Tonight, the Prime Minister has finally announced the next general election, a moment the country needs and has been waiting for, and where, by the force of our democracy, power returns to you. A chance to change for the better your future, your community, your country. Now, it will feel like a long campaign, I'm sure of that. But no matter what else is said and done, that opportunity for change is what this election is about. Over the course of the last 4 years, we've changed the Labour Party, returned it once more to the service of working people.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome former Conservative MP David Campbell-Bannerman. David, you are widely regarded as Mr Grassroots when it comes to the Conservative Party. The Grassroots, I am hearing, are not particularly happy about this election.
No, I think it's a very selfish announcement, to be honest. You know, it will condemn a lot more MPs to having a really tough time, unfortunately. It seems very thoughtless, and that's why it's caused such surprise. You know, I mean, things are going in the right direction. You know, the economy is getting better. Interest rates seem to be on the verge of coming down, and that could all help these MPs. But no, he's decided to go now, and we've got to live with that and, you know, get behind the Conservatives. But it's going to be much more difficult.
It's going to be much more difficult. Let me just bring up onto the screen now, and we can talk through this. What would a Tory government look like? OK, so it would be Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden as his deputy. Over at the Treasury, we've got Jeremy Hunt. He's going to be the Chancellor. And we've got James Cleverly there, who would have the top job at the Home Office. Lord Cameron is going to be the Foreign Secretary, and Victoria Atkins would head up the health department. So that is the Tory top team, David. Let me whiz us through what Labour would look like now. So Sir Keir Starmer would be in charge, with Angela Rayner as his deputy. Rachel Reeves would be Chancellor. Yvette Cooper would end up at the Home Office. David Lammy would be Foreign Secretary. And, of course, Wes Streeting will be in charge at the health department. When you look at those two teams side by side, is it difficult or otherwise for the Tories to make the case to vote for them?
Well, I think the Labour team is very weak, and you can see that from some of their announcements. And like David Lammy, to be honest, some of the things he said do worry us about Brexit, about foreign affairs, support for Palestine, that sort of thing. So I think Labour is pretty fragile, and he may be found out in this election. You might be looking at a 92. I think the issue is this going to be like a 92 election where Conservatives really surprised Sir John Major, actually surprised Labour and Neil Kinnock, or is it like 97, which is a disaster zone with Blair winning the day? And I think that is going to be the contest. And of course, you know, Theresa May managed to lose a 20% lead when she called an unnecessary election. So it's possible that things change, but I think it makes it very, very difficult, and it's a real challenge to the Tory MPs. It wasn't necessary. We could have given it a bit more.
So you fundamentally do not think it was necessary for Rishi Sunak to call this election right now, then, and you think that that could actually have a detrimental thing. Can you expand on to the reasons why you think that Rishi Sunak is selfish for calling this election now?
Because, I mean, you know, no one can understand what he's doing and why he's called it at this particular point. You know, things are, as I say, are going in the right direction. They are getting better. I think that will increase the prospects for many Conservative MPs in tight battles. And we could actually hold on to many more Tory MPs had we left it till November or December. But look, the decision is made, and you know, I think he's in a hurry, really, and you know, we've got to live with this decision. But I don't think history is going to be very kind.
But you're big in the grassroots. Just one last one with you. Are you going to struggle to go and knock on doors to Rishi Sunak?
Well, I'll do it for the Conservatives and do for strong local candidates, but I do struggle, and of course, you know. Others like Ben Houchin, the mayor, the one mayor we held on to, he wrote out Rishi Sunak, wrote out the Conservatives. There are ways of doing it. We've got to back the Conservatives, but I'm afraid Rishi has some you know, there's some problems there that are holding us back.
All right, look, David, thank you very, very much, and I'll be chatting to you, no doubt, quite a lot over the course of the next 6 weeks. There's David Campbell-Bannerman there, all the best. Well, I'm very pleased now to say that I am joined, after having heard quite a bit from the so-called grassroots, certainly to the right anyway, of the Conservative Party. I'm very pleased to now be joined by former Labour Minister Bill Rammell and the former Tory Party Special Advisor, Lauren McEvert. Bill, I'll start with you on this. Keir Starmer and the Labour Party looked more prepared for Rishi Sunak's announcement than Rishi Sunak today, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Prime Minister's statement outside Downing Street was a shambles, covered in rain, you know, huge music playing, and actually quite a long, rambling speech. And then it immediately cut to Keir Starmer, indoors, Prime Ministerial, short, punchy, time for change. And then even Ed Davey was short and on the money. So I think the contrast was quite significant.
It was. Now, actually, I can articulate that a little bit because we have got a social media comparison for you. So this is Sunak's just done his speech. He's on Downing Street. He's gone in to dry off, OK? And this is basically what happened, all right? So this is the Conservative Party's Twitter page, all right? The moment that their leader announced the general election on the 4th of July. Stick with the plan that's working and a checklist there. So it's a sticker. So that's what that is. That picture with all of that stuff. Now, what can only be described as that sticker with bullet points. This, however, was what Labour had ready to go instantly.
Political chaos feeding decline. Feeding chaos, feeding decline. The answer is not 5 more years of the Tories. They have failed. Give the Tories 5 more years and things will only get worse. Britain deserves better than that. Only a changed Labour Party will get Britain's future back. And make no mistake, the Labour Party has changed.
Lauren, you were a former SPAD. There's no way you would have advised them to do this, would you?
I think the advice that went to the Prime Minister today is something that will probably begin to leak out over the course of the next couple of days. And I suspect strongly that there are things that we haven't factored in the public domain yet. It's entirely possible that they're looking at a summer of not being able to stop the boats coming across the channel and a significantly increased number of people arriving illegally in the United Kingdom. It's possible that they've got bad news on the Rwanda scheme, that they feel that this sort of nips in the bud because they're going in advance of it. The thing that I find the most interesting is that the inflation drop today was not good enough, and it was not good enough in certain areas, and I think that means no rate cuts are coming down the line, which doesn't give them room fiscally for any kind of fiscal event in the autumn that could have put more money into public services or given a bit of a tax giveaway. And with that being the case, it's possible that you look at the hand that's coming and say, no, actually we should go now. I take David Campbell-Bannerman's point. Things are going really well. Why would they do this? It's entirely possible to make the argument that yes, things are going well, and that it means it's exactly the right time to do this. But I think the Labour Party exists solely in opposition. They've got a lot of time to put videos like that together.
Yeah.
The Conservative Party is governing, and I think it's very bold, by the way, for Keir Starmer to have put Vaughan Gething anywhere near his leadership campaign when he's under investigation for some really interesting campaign donations during the Labour leadership election in Wales. So I think, a changed Labour Party doesn't look that changed when we're talking about Vaughan Gething.
Well, and I do put it to you as well, Bill, that the Labour Party is not that changed. We had Zara Sultana standing up today. We've had David Lammy talking about, essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, don't sue me, David, but he'd drag Benjamin Netanyahu to The Hague kicking and screaming, wouldn't he? Presumably that means that we would stop selling arms to Israel as well. A massive shift in foreign policy there by the Labour Party. I think most people would think to try to appease the quote-unquote Muslim vote in Britain. Is it really that changed, the Labour Party?
It's fundamentally changed. You look at the selection of parliamentary candidates that has been undertaken under Keir Starmer. It's been utterly ruthless, and no one with a far-left Corbynist perspective has been able to get through. And I know the Tories are going to try and, create this impression over the coming 6 weeks that, Keir is the face for a still very left-wing Labour Party. I don't think that's the case at all. He's not a scary figure. That comes across clearly in the polls, and I think that's going to cut through during the campaign. I also agree that the reason I think that Sunak has gone now rather than waiting for the autumn is they actually think that the polls aren't closing, there's no sign of them closing, and actually it could get worse because Rwanda by the autumn is going to be shown not to be a deterrent. There are going to be no further tax cuts, and there's even been some feverish speculation around Westminster today that the rebels had enough letters to mount a vote of no confidence, and that would have been toasted to Sunak, so he's gone earlier.
Yeah, Lauren, let me just ask you about that, actually, because that is a persistent rumour.
Yeah.
And can you shed any light whatsoever on what the scene was like behind the curtain there in Downing Street with letters of no confidence, what that could have meant, what it still could mean?
I don't think, for now, I think, they've gone, that's it. I don't think that it changes anything if suddenly they announce, there's all these letters. I think now that the statement is made, I think that sort of puts an end to that.
But do you think that might have been a factor in today's decision?
It's possible, but there's no way of knowing unless you're Graham Brady, and Graham Brady keeps these things so close to his chest, and I really hope that everyone's going to buy his book in the autumn when it comes out, because I certainly am, and I can't wait to read all the things he's hopefully going to divulge that have really gone on in the last 7 years.
Well, interesting. Now, let's just deal with where we are right now in terms of, we're going to have to get something that resembles a manifesto from both of these parties at some point soon. So, as of today, Sir Keir Starmer's 6 pledges, which were unveiled last week: deliver economic stability. Don't ask Wes Streeting to name all of these, by the way. Deliver economic stability, cut NHS waiting times, launch a new border security command, set up Great British Energy, crack down on antisocial behaviour, and recruit 6,500 teachers. Can I just do a little comparison straight away with Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges? Halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists. And we've also got in there as well saying, probably the most famous one, infamous one maybe, stop the boats. Lauren, I'll start with you again on this. Has Rishi Sunak done any of that?
I think he's certainly been attempting to. Growing the economy, the economy has shown to be growing. We aren't in the recession that we thought we were going to be in at the end of last year. The figures have been revised up again and probably will do so again later in the year. Halving inflation, without doing anything, basically inflation was likely to halve this year. So that was a fairly easy one to meet without accidentally stuffing up. And yet, what I said earlier is still the case. It sort of hasn't gone far enough to guarantee that they're going to be rate cuts. But that's largely not the UK's fault. The Fed in the US in December said they were anticipating 6 rate cuts this year, and they've revised that to 1. So that's a global issue. Debt falling, that's a problem in relation to the rest of the economic picture. The small boats issue is probably why he's chosen to go on early rather than late. Because I suspect that that's going to be a problem this summer.
Yeah, OK. And just to revisit what Keir Starmer's had to say as well, Bill, some of these deliver economic stability, cut NHS waiting times, launch a new border security command, set up Great British Energy, crack down antisocial behaviour, recruit 6,500 teachers. I mean, it's a little bit wishy-washy, isn't it?
It's not. There are real echoes of the run-up to 1997 here. Small, credible first steps.
Blair without the flower, you mean?
Look, we're in different times and it requires different leadership. But small, credible changes. On top of that, within the manifesto, you're going to see the commitment to a massive house-building programme, both houses that are needed, but also to kick-start the economy, and a strong programme of workers' rights to increase security within the workplace. But I think it's about credibility and the huge contrast between Sunak and a failure to deliver. The boats are not stopping. The numbers are actually increasing. NHS waiting lists still at an all-time high. The failure to deliver against a credible programme of change. And that's, frankly, what the country is crying out for.
OK, interesting stuff. Look, both of you, can I just say an absolutely massive thank you for everything so far tonight from both of you. Let's just go now as well to... I think we've got a little clip to actually play. Yes, another little sign, I think, of Rishi Sunak. This was him basically discussing his decision, I think, wasn't it, to talk about the next election.
This morning, we received the welcome news that inflation has returned to normal. Now, this is a sign that our plan and our priorities are working, and I know you're only just starting to feel the benefits. But this hard-won economic stability was only ever meant to be the beginning, and that's why I've called the election. Now, I believe that our plan and the bold actions that we're prepared to take will deliver a secure future for you, your family, and our United Kingdom.
Yes, OK, so there we go. So that is Rishi Sunak, dried off a little bit after he announced the election. He says, this is why I called the election. But I welcome now political correspondent for The Spectator, James Heal. Now, James, you noticed something quite interesting earlier on, which is actually how woefully unprepared for this election the Conservative Party is. Explain.
Well, I was talking to some London Tories earlier, and they was rather sort of irritated by about how sudden this was all thrust upon them. And they were actually saying that rather than getting the people who were speaking at this event tonight, which I was at, the first stump speech of the campaign, there's about 100 or so, most of them actually were sort of Tory candidates and special advisors, rather than the kind of activists that, of course, 4 weeks ago, Patrick, were out campaigning for Susan Hall, the poor bloody infantry, as it were.
Yeah, it's interesting, though, isn't it? Because I was having a look at one of your tweets earlier as well, James, and you were saying about how few candidates they actually appear to have ready to go.
Yes, of course, yes. So this is the issue about how many actually candidates have been selected for certain areas. Obviously, we know MPs like Chris Heaton-Harris in Northern Ireland, and also, Theresa May in Maidenhead are going to be standing there. And there's a few sort of Tory plum safe seats there. But there's also a lot of other marginals and seats where, frankly, a really good candidate could make a massive difference. And there are dozens and dozens and dozens of these seats where basically you're going to have Tory HQ, CCHQ, are going to have to impose by-election, which means they'll get 3 candidates thrust on them. Often there's the case there's 1 semi-decent candidate and 2 no-hopers. And so we're going to end up with some MPs next time who, frankly, haven't been subjected to an awful lot of scrutiny from local members.
Look, you are so plugged in. I often say, you've got your finger on the pulse so much. You perform open heart surgery in the corridors of Westminster, James. What was in your WhatsApps today? Give us a flavour of the kind of things that people were messaging you today, James.
I think some of them I can't read out on polite society, but there was a lot of shock, a lot of surprise, shall we say. One of them compared it to the charge of the Light Brigade, and another then said that, unfortunately, the charge of the Light Brigade only had 40% fatalities. So I think, look, there's a lot of doom and gloom from MPs. Interestingly, some of the people around, special advisor type level, etc., are actually quite pumped up for this fight. They think that not enough scrutiny has been given to Keir Starmer. They're looking forward to taking their policy area to the shadow cabinet. But I think, a real divide in the Tory party tonight as they consider 6 weeks' time election day.
Yeah, that is going to be something we're going to be discussing about later on in this show. What level of scrutiny have we actually seen from Sir Keir Starmer and some of that front bench? I brought up what the front benches are going to be like a little bit earlier on. We'll do it again later as well. But that is really what people are voting for. What are their views on things? And just in the last week, there's been a flavour, I think, a flavour of a couple of things to the Labour Party. More men in women's changing rooms. You could easily sell that as the old easier-to-change gender stuff. You can also certainly pick them apart when it comes to Israel and foreign policy. What else will there be? I expect taxation could be another big one. But James Heal there from The Spectator, thank you very much, my good man. You're going to be a busy boy over the next 6 weeks, so I hope to see you again very soon. I am going to introduce and welcome into the fray now Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, thank you very much. Were you caught by surprise today?
No, not at all. I mean, I try and look at these things more strategically. When you look at the number of the elections that are taking place across the world, two of the biggest ones are in Britain and the United States. We cannot go to the polls at the same time. To do so would encourage opposition, competitors, our adversaries, to take advantage of us being distracted. And I'm sure conversations took place between Number 10 and Washington to ensure that we perhaps went early. We could have gone late in December, but that obviously wouldn't have been possible because, obviously, Trump's election with Biden was going to happen on that fixed date. That's why I think we've ended up with July.
What do you make of the way that he did it today in the pouring rain with the megaphone playing music along the side of him? It's not a good look, Tobias.
No, it's unfortunate, but the battle commences. The rumours today were everywhere, but the King has now been informed. The announcement's been made outside Number 10. Let's get on with it. Let's get on with it. Many of us have been knowing this is going to be happening in the next month, so you can't say it's without a surprise. Oh my goodness, there's going to be an election. We should all be prepared for this. And not taking away, it will be the toughest election that I've fought. It's been a turbulent period in British politics. In some cases, would have tested any occupant at Number 10. But that starting gun has been fired. And actually, the backdrop that we now see ourselves in, with inflation falling to 2%, growth better than in the continent and so forth, business confidence returning, we've got much to play for. If anything, we've just got to sort ourselves out. We've got to show a sense of purpose, a sense of vigour, a sense of unity that we actually want to do this. Bearing in mind that all manifestos will now be scrutinised, because you were just touching on there just before. Labour has really got away with it for some time because we've hogged the headlines for the wrong reasons. Yeah. So we're going to have those leadership debates as well. It's going to be interesting, but it's up to us to make the case. And in most cases, this is Clinton's got it right. It's the economy that still counts. The economy so important. If we can show that we're, proper, responsible custodians of the economy, we have a fair chance of doing well.
How much of this, Tobias, relies on Rwanda working? How much of this relies on those flights taking off in that first few days? He's got 4 days, really, in July to get a plane off the ground.
I think that's one aspect. Everybody's pushed this up to be totemic. That's one element for which some people find it very, very important indeed. I stress again, most people are more concerned about their wallets, about their bank accounts, about looking after their families, of getting through the cost of living crisis. And what we've seen is manage that. We've moved into far calmer fiscal waters. Politically, we're into calmer political waters as well. And the other aspect of this, which you and I have discussed many times, our world's getting more dangerous, not less. Who's best to lead us, to be able to protect British interests, to advance our defence posture, to make sure that our economy, that's so globally exposed, is actually protected? These are the big questions that I think.
But look, how do you go after Keir Starmer? Are you guys going to go on the front foot a bit here? In the last couple of weeks, I'll keep banging on about this, but literally in the last week, you've had the gender stuff from Keir Starmer, which you could easily sell as well. If you vote for Labour, it means more blokes in women's changing rooms. That doesn't go down well. We know that from the SNP. You could easily sell what's going on in Israel at the moment. Labour in the pocket of the pro-Palestine marches, are they? Is that how you go at Keir Starmer? What do you do?
Well, that is one approach. I don't believe that just telling people what's wrong with the other side is going to win you. That's populism, okay? That's opportunism. That doesn't show that you got the responsibility of where you take Britain. All it does is say what Labour would do badly. Well, we can figure that out anyway. What we need to do is actually show where we're going, how we're going to lead the country. And I stress again that given where we are economically now, we need to look at ourselves and show that we have the passion, the discipline, the unity, that sense of purpose, that vigor to stay in number 10. I'm afraid that sense of purpose has been suboptimal. Let's be honest about that. So if we want to narrow the polls, you know, if we want to get that towards a hung parliament or win, or indeed, you know, lose well, let alone lose badly, all those variations are actually up to us.
And one thing that we're going to be talking about very shortly, and we're going to hear from him as well, is Nigel Farage is deciding, apparently, and announcing tomorrow at 11 a.m. whether or not he's going to run. How much of a concern is Reform UK to you?
Well, Nigel Farage should ask himself whether he wants a Labour government or a Conservative government. It's as simple as that. And if he wants a Labour government, then step up. So, you know, push reform, because all they're going to do is deny people deny the support for the Conservatives. And in many marginal seats, that will see the pendulum tilt towards Labour, and then you get a Labour government. Is that really what Nigel Farage wants?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. We'll find out, won't we? We'll find out. Tobias, thank you very, very much. That's Tobias Elwood, that Conservative MP. Let me just reintroduce to the fray the voting intention, just to ground ourselves in all of this. So this is where we actually are. So you take all the noise today out of it. This is the latest voting intention. Labour on 43, the Conservatives on 26, Lib Dems there on 10, Reform on 9, the Greens on 5, and the SNP on 3. I am still joined now by Bill Rammell and Lauren McKevitt as well. Bill, I'll start with you. You know, he's talking relatively tough there, isn't he, Tobias Elwood, saying, you know, Labour are going to come under absolutely massive scrutiny now. And I think one of the areas they're going to come under scrutiny is the economy. He said it's the economy, stupid. Well, inflation is at its lowest level for nearly 3 years. The Tories there could say they've steadied the ship. We are staring down the barrel of tax cuts. But if you vote Labour, non-DOMs and VAT on private schools probably won't cut it. You'll probably end up with, I'm just reading this off here, more inheritance tax, more capital gains, cutting tax relief on pensions contributions, battering second homeowners, and even introducing a wealth tax. Who'd vote for that?
But that's not what's going to happen. You know, the Labour Party has been absolutely clear. We know we've got the biggest tax burden since the Second World War. We know that's hitting people hard. And we're not going to commit to, you know, huge spending increases backed up by tax rises. The only way we're going to get the level of public spending that we need is through improved economic growth, and therefore stability, ending the chaos, a huge house building programme to kickstart the economy is part of the way that we get that. But also Tobias talks about division. You know, David Campbell Bannerman, the voice of the grassroots, coming on your programme the day the Prime Minister calls the general election and massively criticising him. The Tory party is riven from top to bottom. The public recognises that, and that's why, and it's part of the reason that we're going to get the change.
Lauren, I'm going to ask you to sell the Conservative Party now, if you don't mind, to our viewers, to our listeners, because, you know, it's looking like a tricky job at the moment.
I actually think that you're not entirely wrong. I think Labour are going to come into power, if they do come into power, and revert to type and say that they're going to start taxing, that they're going to introduce a wealth tax. I think they're going to have enormous pressure on trying to change how taxation is weighted within the United Kingdom between generations, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think that Labour are going to revert to what they always do, which is to end up with a higher tax burden. And the one we've got at the moment is unsustainable anyway.
Look, this is the biggest
guys, I'm really sorry. I'm going to cut across you because I have just received a message from our political editor, Christopher Hope. So strap yourselves in here. Extraordinary but true. Some furious Conservative MPs are tonight working on a plot to call off the general election by replacing Rishi Sunak as leader before Parliament is dissolved next Thursday. One rebel Tory MP tells me, that's Christopher Hope, that he believes several more letters of no confidence in Sunak have been submitted to Graham Brady today. The MP, who's unnamed, says, today has clearly been an absolute disaster, but the election is not irrevocable. Up until the point of the dissolution of Parliament, when the writs are moved to begin the contest, it can still be aborted. In other words, if enough Tory MPs, who are clearly going to lose their seats in this already utterly shambolic campaign, write to Sir Graham Brady tomorrow, the election could still be revoked. Lauren, your reaction?
I don't know about the 22 rules on once an election's been called and versus when dissolution actually shows up, because one is a parliamentary procedure and one is a Conservative Party procedure, and they may actually be in some conflict there. I do, however, think that once an election announcement comes, everybody's got to start rowing in the same direction. We can't use this as an opportunity to fight like ferrets in a sack, because no one's going to vote for us.
Well,
and
it's happening,
really
by the looks of things, with respect. It looks like it's happening.
Really, really dumb to go down that road, because all that ends up happening is you look like you can't run the country.
Go on, Bill.
Chaos and division demonstrated before our eyes. And the cut-through phrase in Keir Starmer's press conference this afternoon was country first, party second. And what we've seen from the Tory party over the last 14 years is party first every time.
OK, right, both of you, thank you. And sorry to spring that little bit of breaking news on it, but it's the joy of live television on a general election announcement evening, isn't it? Both of you, thank you very much. Really, really top-drawer stuff, that Bill Rammell there and Lauren McEvett as well. Now, there is a man whose name has, well, has not been as prominent as it might have been, but Nigel Farage has reacted. Initially, this is how he initially reacted. OK, so Rishi Sunak standing on the steps of Downing Street, getting rained on while Steve Bray screamed in through a megaphone. Here is Nigel's hot take.
There it is, July the 4th, Independence Day in America, and for this country, Deliverance Day from a bunch of charlatans who call themselves Conservatives but govern as big state liberals. I mean, look at it. Look at the images. The lack of professionalism is unbelievable. To stand there getting soaked in the rain, to read from the notes like a robot, without passion, without belief, without vim, without vigour. But it sums up 14 years of conservatism, why they are going to get wiped in this election. But what he has done, he's chosen suicide over total obliteration, because as the months go by, it'll get worse and worse and worse. No planes will go to Rwanda whatsoever. Got to tell you, I don't like the look of a Labour government one little bit, but this lot, having betrayed Brexit, having betrayed everything I gave them in 2019, all the help I gave them back 5 years ago, deserve everything that is coming to them.
Wow. So that was Nigel, initially just moments after Rishi Sunak announcing a general election, and then later on GB News he said this.
Fight the election. As for what I do, I'll think about it overnight.
So that's no commitment either way.
No commitment either way from me at the moment. I will think about it overnight.
And get this, Reform have announced a press conference at 11 a.m. tomorrow. So at 11 a.m. tomorrow, it's looking likely that we will find out, all of us, whether or not Nigel Farage is officially back. This is going to be probably the biggest news story of the day tomorrow. To help me look ahead, I'm joined now by former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe. Anne, your reaction to whether or not Nigel Farage will come back?
Well, he will do us, by us, I mean Reform, a power of good if he does come back. He will almost certainly send, our percentage, which in most polls at any rate is now well into the teens. He will undoubtedly add a few percent to that. He will invigorate the campaign. He will be a huge challenge to both Conservative and Labour. So I very much hope he does. But even if he doesn't, Reform will now go full steam ahead. I mean, all that Sunak has done today, apart from apparently demonstrating that there's no such thing as an umbrella in Downing Street, all he's actually done today is to hand the opposition power 6 months before he had to. And if anybody understands that, I don't.
OK, I mean, some people will say, look, Rishi Sunak has got inflation down to its lowest levels in nearly 3 years. The economy's looking in better shape than it has done for a little while. He's also got the visa dependence, the number of people bringing family visas, I suppose you could call it. That's down. We're expecting the net migration figures out tomorrow. There's no way, I mean, touch wood, touch everything, there's no way they're going to be higher than they were last year or the year before. So maybe now is the right time. He's even got the EU singing to his tune over Rwanda. So is he going to get a better time than this?
I think no time is good for him, quite honestly. You're there saying, that he's got inflation down and the economy is much better than it was when? I mean, during COVID, immediately after COVID, of course it's better now than it was then. And as for Rwanda, honestly, Patrick, I'm tired of hearing about Rwanda. Yeah. I'll believe it when the planes take off.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough, to be honest, Dan, actually. Rishi Sunak started his speech today, in the driving rain, OK? Yeah. And he then decided to start it by talking about that time that the government locked us all down relentlessly and shattered the economy with some of the decisions that were being made there by the likes of Chris Whitty, etc. What a way to launch an election campaign. What did you make of that?
Well, as I say, I didn't find that performance impressive on several levels. But if I were going into an election campaign, I would be talking about all the positive and what I intended to do. And I can only assume that he's rather short of those.
I mean, one of the big noises out tonight, and I am just going to reiterate this because this is just coming through to us here at GB News, so forgive me as I read this again, but this is from our political editor, Christopher Hope, OK? And it is absolutely extraordinary. He is saying, Anne, that there is currently a coup going on to try to stop the general election from taking place. I mean, that is remarkable stuff. Conservative MPs submitting letters to Graham Brady, having had submitted letters to Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of the Backbench 22 Committee. He says, extraordinary if true, some furious Conservative MPs are working tonight on a plot to call off the general election. He doesn't say if true, he says it is true. So this is true. Christopher Hope, he's always bang on the money. He's saying that they are desperately trying to stop the election.
Well, I mean, first of all, you say it's remarkable. It should be remarkable. But it's so entirely typical of all the infighting that's gone on and all the undermining of Rishi Sunak's position that's gone on over, the last couple of years, that it's not remarkable at all. It's almost predictable. But it just shows you what an utterly chaotic circus they are. And the only choice, if it were just Keir Starmer, is choice between chaos and no policies at all.
Yeah, look, let me stick with this breaking line that we're getting here at GB News from our political editor, which is there is an ongoing plot to call off the election. I think I might know why. I think we all probably know why. But here's how many seats each party is projected to win if the general election was held today. Labour, 443. Conservatives, 124. Lib Dems, 40. The SNP, 19, Greens, 2. Let me reiterate that. Labour, 443 seats. The Conservatives down to 124. The Lib Dems on 40. The SNP on 19. The Greens on 2. Is that why the Tories want to call it off, Anne?
Well, almost certainly, because, as I've said, he's just handing power to the opposition, 6 months before he actually has to. And so I can imagine that Tories who are about to lose their seats, lose their livelihoods, probably do think, well, we should have another 6 months. But, I mean, the idea that you can stop a Prime Minister calling a general election is far-fetched.
So the majority for Labour there will be 236, apparently. My math isn't great, but that's what I believe it is. It will be a 236-seat majority for the Labour Party, which is apparently why now, if you are just joining us, there is an ongoing plot, apparently, to submit enough letters to Sir Graham Brady to call this election off. And with respect, this is the exact kind of chaos that when we compare this with the way that Sir Keir Starmer dealt with today's announcement. He was standing in a room, he had the 2 union flags behind him, he was dry, there was nobody shouting through a megaphone with him as well, and he had a very simple message, and it was a one-word thing on a plinth that just said, change. And I wonder if they've actually got that better than the Tories on this.
Well, they may have got it better than the Tories, but that doesn't take much doing, does it? And Starmer doesn't offer change. Every policy, and I could go through them yet again, every policy that he's announced, he's reversed, sometimes in very short order indeed. He doesn't stand for change. Reform alone stands for real change. The question is, will people have the courage to go down that route?
OK, and a lot of people will be saying now, and indeed, I do know a lot of Conservative voters that do say, with absolute respect, Anne, that there is no point bothering to vote for reform. We've had Richard Tice making his election announcement from what looked like a hotel room today. You are going to hand the keys to the Labour Party, aren't you? So what's the point of voting reform, Anne?
Right, let me just spell it out. Vote Tory, get Starmer. Vote Starmer, get Starmer. Vote for real change, vote for reform, and you get reform. As I say, it's a question of people now finding the courage to do it. But the idea that reform is going to cost the Tories the election when they cannot beat Starmer anyway is just ridiculous.
And thank you very, very much. That is Anne Widdecombe there reacting to a heck of a lot of news. I'm just going to reiterate to everybody at home this breaking announcement from our political editor, OK? Extraordinary but true. Some furious Conservative MPs is now working on a plot to call off the general election by replacing Rishi Sunak as leader before Parliament is dissolved next Thursday. Christopher Hope is bang on it. We will keep you right up to date here. Now, when I return after the weather, I'm going to have a very special guest. We have got a Labour frontbencher. It's Jonathan Reynolds, and I think it's fair to say he's got a heck of a lot to answer for as this general election gets going. Today is the day, people. Let's do it.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It's been a very wet day for many of us today, and the rain is going to continue for many parts as we go overnight. All this unsettled weather is in association with an area of low pressure that is gradually making its way northwestwards, but it's progressing pretty slowly. And the rain, as a result, is going to linger across many northern parts of the UK as we go through this evening and overnight. It's going to be heavy and persistent for many parts, which is why we're going to continue to see rainfall totals building up, leading to some issues. Temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount because of the unsettled weather, even in the south where it's going to be largely dry, likely to stay in double digits. As we go through tomorrow then, a bit of a north-south split. Across northern parts it is going to be wet, and we'll see rain through the morning too. The rain doesn't look like it will be as heavy as through today, but because of the high rainfall totals we've seen recently, there could be some further issues, making flooding a little bit worse in some places. Also heavy rain across parts of eastern Northern Ireland, Northern England and North Wales in particular. Like I said, some further ongoing issues, some more disruption to travel possible. A drier story further south, quite cloudy through the morning, though I am expecting some bright or sunny spells to develop as we head into the afternoon, particularly across parts of East Anglia and South East England. Here there's a good chance of seeing some sunshine, and in the sunshine here it should feel pleasantly warm. Temperatures likely to peak just about in the low 20s towards the southeast. Further north and west where you have the rain, temperatures will be suppressed, some places staying in single digits, and watch out for some blustery winds towards the northwest. As we look towards Friday, and there will still be some further outbreaks of rain, especially across northern parts though. These look fairly light and there will be some dry spells in between. Further south likely to stay mostly dry, and there may even be some bright or sunny spells developing. Saturday looks set to be the driest and sunniest day of the weekend before a bit more rain on Sunday for many. See you later.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome back to a very special episode of Patrick Christys tonight here on GB News. It's a massive show for a massive day. The general election is on July the 4th. There is a heck of a lot to pick the bones out of, but we're going to start with Labour because we're joined now by Shadow Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds. Jonathan, look, thank you very much for joining us tonight. A big day, it's fair to say. Can I just start now, because Labour are going to be scrutinised in a way that perhaps maybe they haven't been previously. Can I start with you on immigration? When it comes to things like Rwanda, EU countries are looking to copy us now, 15 of them. If Labour decides to stop Rwanda, does that not make us look ridiculous and look like Brexit Britain doesn't care about controlling our borders?
No, it doesn't, and good evening. It has been quite an interesting day, hasn't it? No, look, on illegal immigration, right, it's an incredibly serious issue, and the choice at the election, because it is a big choice election, is whether you want gimmicks, whether you want a huge amount of money wasted on things that will make no impact on it. I mean, the government got 100,000 people nearly in hotels costing £8 million a day. If they take 300 of those people to Rwanda for £500 million, that doesn't fix the problem. We'll take that resource, we'll put it into the proper border command that is necessary to have the real action against criminal gangs that are behind this and really enforcing it. If you're spending so much money on illegal immigration, on something which is not going to make any substantial difference, that is completely unjustifiable. So it's one of the choices people will have in this election, and to be frank, you'll see this across a whole range of areas. If people are happy with how things are at the minute, of course they will stick with Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party. But if they want something different, something better, if they want change, it's a vote for Labour that will do that. And Labour can say, we can be the change the country needs, because look at how we've changed since 2019. Look at how we've had the humility to respond to that record defeat and be competitive now. There's a long way to go, but we can be proud of where we've got to, and we can be the change the country needs.
Can I just say, I know you're very keen to say that. I do suspect, Mr Reynolds, that one thing you're less keen to say is that currently under the Illegal Migration Act, which passed in July last year, it effectively bars anyone who comes to the UK illegally from claiming asylum. Well, Labour has apparently clarified a few weeks ago that those people, potentially between 90,000 possibly 115,000, will be entitled to claim asylum. Can you confirm that?
Well, what's the alternative? Keeping them in hotels at the cost of £8 million a day? Indefinitely. They're going to have to apply, and if they haven't got a right to be in the UK, they've got to go. And if they have a right to be in the UK, if we're going to accept those people, we can integrate them into British society, and they can benefit from putting something back into the UK rather than just be a cost in the halfway house we have at the minute. So it's about a serious policy rather than a gimmick that will make no difference and cost the country a lot of money.
That serious policy, though, Mr Reynolds, does mean that the asylum backlog is probably going to increase almost overnight by around 90,000 people, though, does it not, under a Labour government?
Well, it means that we would have a huge amount of money that we're not going to spend on Rwanda, because the costs of that have already gone to over £500 million, and we can put it into the kinds of things that will make a difference. And crucially, Patrick, we can say, if you're spending under the Conservative Party £8 million a day, you can take some of that money, employ caseworkers, process those claims, get people integrated if they should be here, if they've got a right to be here, and if they haven't, they've got to leave. The alternative, just having people at a huge cost to the UK without ever resolving the issue, is just not a serious approach. But that is the approach, as you say, the Conservative Party have taken at the minute.
All right, I just want to whiz it over to foreign policy now, if that's all right, because David Lammy essentially would support calls to have Benjamin Netanyahu arrested if the ICC decides that. Labour also, I was hearing today, is quite keen on recognising the Palestinian state, a free Palestine that Salman Rushdie said would be a terrorist state. Is a vote for Labour a vote to make an enemy of Israel?
And no, it's not, and it's very clear to say that what David Lammy has actually said is we support international institutions, whether that's the United Nations or the International Criminal Court. It's not for ourselves to make ourselves part of those deliberations, but we support the rule of law internationally. As a country, the UK has always supported those institutions because we recognise that's in our interest to do so. And when it comes to Israel and the Palestinians, what we want to see is a real peace process. We want to see a two-state solution based on 1967 borders, land swaps between those two countries, an agreement on Jerusalem, an agreement on the right of return for certain people who are still alive who relate to that. That is a peace process.
How could you do that if, as a government, if you win the next election, you would be supportive of calls for Benjamin Netanyahu to be arrested and potentially sent to The Hague if he ever stepped foot in Britain?
Well, the agreement, the basis of any peaceful resolution to conflict is always got to be the rule of law. So I can't, to ask you the question the other way around, I can't see how you could propose a long-term peace settlement in the Middle East if it wasn't going to be underpinned by international law, by partners agreeing security and respect for Palestinians and Israelis alongside each other. I mean, let's not forget, this is a conflict which is not a zero-sum game. What Israel needs is a Palestinian state alongside it that gives it security and a long-term peace settlement. The Palestinians need their own state and dignity too. So that has got to be the basis of a peace process, and international law has surely got to be the basis by which those two sides agree to do that.
Are you worried about losing the Muslim vote?
I take nothing for granted when it comes to any community. Now, I think in any part of the UK, from the top of Scotland to Cornwall, Labour's the only competitive party, the only party that can say, if you want to change from the present government, we're your vehicle to do that, but we will take seriously and always take seriously the needs and concerns of every community, because let's be frank, we've had all these opinion polls, not a single vote has been cast and will not be cast for a long period of time, so we will take absolutely nothing for granted, but we will campaign for the basis of the change the UK needs.
OK, look, just to bring us back extra domestic now, Labour apparently wants to make it easier to change gender. A vote for Labour is a vote for more blokes in women's changing rooms, is it?
No, I think we want to treat every community in the UK with dignity and respect. We are committed to single-sex spaces. We think that's an important part, as it is already under the Equality Act, so we aren't proposing any changes there. But as a conversation, as a part of a general election campaign, I would hope everyone, politicians and broadcasters, would treat every community with the respect that surely they all deserve.
OK. And look, just on the economy, inflation is now at its low. I suspect this might be one of the reasons why Rishi Sunak decided to call this election in the driving rain outside Downing Street while Steve Bray screamed at him, by the way. But inflation is now at its lowest level for around 3 years anyway. It could be argued, couldn't it, that the Tories have steadied the ship a bit here, that the end of record taxation is in sight. We can practically smell the money there. But to meet your spending commitments, as I understand it, I don't think that non-DOMs and VAT on private schools is going to cut it, OK? There is a fear that you might smash, you know, with inheritance tax, with capital gains tax, with cutting tax relief on pensions contributions, battering second homeowners, introducing a wealth tax. Are you going to make us poorer?
No, we have taxes at historically high levels under the Conservative Party and quite poor public services at the same time. That's because the economy hasn't grown anything like anyone would have wanted it to grow for the last 14 years. On things like business investment, on productivity, they've dropped off a cliff in the last 14 years. That is why people at the end of this Parliament will be worse off than they were at the beginning, and there's no way to avoid that. That is the Conservative record on the economy. We have ruled out all of the things that you've just said. Okay. We have put forward where we want to see improvements, switch spends. So yes, to employ 6,500 additional teachers in state schools, we will charge VAT and business rates on private education. That's a very small part of the population. It's a pragmatic response to putting more money into state education. We will not have the big loopholes in the change on the non-dom taxation policy the government have had. You can't put your foreign assets into trust under Labour, and therefore there's more revenue. That will pay for the 40,000 extra NHS procedures every week that will be available under a Labour government. We will do some changes to how private equity income is taxed to provide, again, an improvement in public services, more support for young people in terms of mental health in schools and breakfast hubs. But these are the choices that will be available. These are switch spends of things we would do differently that would bring about an immediate improvement. And I know some people, quite a lot of people actually, will say, look, there are so many problems in the UK right now. How can anyone make a difference? How can any general election or politics make a difference? Well, I think you do that by showing those practical first steps you would take. We've got 6 in the Labour Party. They include the things I've just mentioned, and that's how we will start this journey of national renewal, which is so essential.
You've preempted my final question to you, and thank you very much for your time. But I'm going to have to ask: can you do one better than West Streeting? Come on, give us the 6 pledges.
Well, they are, first of all, economic stability, so we never repeat the disaster of Liz Truss. The first step is the 40,000 extra NHS procedures every week. The third procedure is the pledge on illegal immigration, which we've just discussed on this. The fourth is switching on GB Energy, really excited by this, a new state energy company working with the private sector on those energy things. The fifth is tackling antisocial behaviour, because we'll do the police efficiency programme, more police officers and PCSOs, and the sixth is the 6,500 extra teachers. So they're the 6 first steps we'll get under a Labour government. Thank you.
All right, Jonathan, look, thank you very much, Mr. Reynolds. Great to have you on the show, and no doubt I'll be talking to you a bit more over the next 6 weeks. Take care. All right, that is the Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds there. Fair play to him, I must say, for at least getting all of those 6. Right, OK, so it's on, it's happening. The election has been called.
And we will have a general election on the 4th of July. This election will take place at a time when the world is more dangerous than it has been since the end of the Cold War.
Keir Starmer immediately hit back.
Tonight, the Prime Minister has finally announced the next general election, a moment the country needs and has been waiting for.
July the 4th is the date that Britain decides, but is this the right time to call it? Let's have a little look, shall we? Rishi Sunak is expecting flights to Rwanda to take off the ground in the first week of July, and now European nations are copying us.
Indeed, what we've just seen in the last few weeks is 15 EU countries actually all making the same point, that that's what this requires. That's why our Rwanda scheme is so important.
Well, the Tories have apparently deported 10,000 people back to their home country. That's 2,000 up on this time last year. On the economy, inflation has fallen to its lowest level in almost 3 years.
Our economy is now growing faster than anyone predicted, outpacing Germany, France and the United States. And this morning it was confirmed that inflation is back to normal. This means that the pressure on prices will ease and mortgage rates will come down. This is proof that the plan and priorities I set out are working.
On legal immigration, today it was announced that there has been an 80% fall in students bringing their dependents over. Good. There's been a 58% fall in care workers bringing their dependents over. Good. Tomorrow, the net migration numbers will be revealed, and it's expected that those numbers will be much lower than the figure of 672,000 last year, although many people will still think that is way too high. Sunak will have looked at what the Labour Party has done this week, and you heard me questioning Jonathan Reynolds on some of this stuff earlier on. They've decided, essentially, to make an enemy of Israel, some would say.
Labour's position is that the decision by the International Criminal Court Chief Prosecutor to apply for arrest warrants is an independent matter for the court and the prosecutor. And Labour believes that the UK and all parties to the Rome Statute have a legal obligation to comply with orders and warrants issued by the court.
Labour want to make it easier for people to change gender. This means that Rishi Sunak can go to the polls and tell you, the voter, that a vote for Labour is a vote for more blokes in women's changing rooms. But with all of these polling companies, look at that list there, putting Labour ahead of the Tories, and the latest poll showing that Labour has a 17-point lead over the Conservatives, Rishi Sunak certainly has a mountain to climb. And shall we have a little reminder, there it is, of how that climb started. Rishi Sunak standing, getting soaked in the driving rain while someone drowned out his speech with the song Things Can Only Get Better.
And this morning it was confirmed that inflation is back to normal.
Well, let's have a little compare, shall we, to Keir Starmer. A lectern with the word change on it inside. 2 union flags, clearly audible.
Most importantly of all, we do all this with a new spirit of service. Country first, party second.
Well, the questions are this, really, aren't they? Has Rishi Sunak picked the right moment to call an election, or has he lost it before it's even started? Let's get the thoughts of my panel. We've got the Director of Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. I am actually tempted to start, by the way, with that breaking news that we had earlier from our political editor, Christopher Hope. And I'll put this to you, Mark. Apparently there is an ongoing plot by Conservatives to stop this election.
Yeah, I mean, this sounds ludicrous to me. As I understand the rules, you could still trigger a leadership election in the Conservative Party. I mean, it would be a death wish of all death wishes. Now, Rishi has called the election. But to achieve that, you'd need 53, I think it is, Conservative MPs would have to write a letter to Graham Brady. They still have the technical ability to do that. There would then be a vote of no confidence that Sunak would almost certainly win overwhelmingly. So it's not just triggering the 53 to call that no confidence motion. You then need 175 to go along with this plan. They had nowhere near that level of support. So I think actually if this gets off the ground any more than it already has, it makes the Conservative Party and the plotters look even more preposterous. If people had wanted to get rid of Rishi Sunak, they needed to do this 6 or 12 months ago. And there has never been sufficient support to even trigger a contest.
They were warned. They were warned, you know, how bad things are going to get under Rishi.
Right, but I'm just saying they could have, I mean, it's required 53 Tory MPs at any time to trigger that contest, then about 170 to remove the leader of the party. You can't try doing this on the day the leader's called an election.
And when you look at, when you listen to Jonathan Reynolds, so confident and competent and quiet and gentle and thoughtful. Can you look at that and then look at this silly, childlike nonsense?
Yeah, right. I get that he was able to talk, right? Which is, by the way, the least I suspect. And he does seem like quite a nice chap, all right, having not actually met him personally. One thing I will say, though, is he wasn't particularly strong at all when it came to the gender stuff, which is going to play a big part if the Conservatives get their backside in gear and decide to do something on that.
Because this is not the platform.
And Labour are going to have an asylum seeker amnesty, essentially, for about 90-odd thousand people.
Which will save money in the long term, but it's better to do that. And then the problem
These
that you lot have got
are all going to be brain surgeons, aren't they?
You've got people who are brown can't be brain surgeons.
No,
Muslims can't be brain surgeons. People from other countries can't be brain surgeons. I was in the middle of a list, Adam. I hadn't finished my list.
Why do you always try to make people look like they're racist or homophobic? I
was in the middle of a list.
You do it to me every week. Now you're doing it to Patrick. It's a bad trait.
Every week I try and make you seem homophobic or racist.
Let's deal with the matter. Let's deal with the matter
Why
in
would
hand.
that be easy?
Let's deal with the matter in hand,
Okay.
which is what we were saying there, really, which is that it's all very well and good Keir Starmer having some of these 6 pledges. However, there are concerns, and Jonathan Reynolds was not necessarily able to just swat away things that people will care about, which is the asylum seeker backlog.
I think even you couldn't help liking him in that interview. The problem is he hasn't got 13 years of failure behind him. He's got a blank slate. And whatever your party politics are, it's got to be easier to have a clean, blank, fresh piece of paper, which is what they've got.
Now, Adam, I'm asking this because I think you represent a huge amount of our viewers and listeners, and I don't mind saying that is one of the main reasons, apart from the fact that we just like you generally, that we get you on this show all the time. How are you going to vote?
At the minute, I do not trust, I said it last week, I do not trust the Tories and I do not trust Labour for many reasons.
You're going to vote Green, aren't you?
At the moment, I can't bring myself to vote, which is a terrible thing, because then I can't moan about what happens in the future.
I think you will anyway.
What I do believe is that the political class of this country forgot that they are meant to represent us. They suddenly started believing over the last 4 years that they control us. It's gone to their heads. There's so many arrogant, power-hungry people now in our parliament. People like myself and many others that I speak to have lost all trust in UK politics. Now, you know, Reform have set up, and I like a lot of things that they say. Are they ready to get my vote at the moment? No, they're not. We're in a dire state in this country, and no one trusts, well, the majority of people I speak to do not trust UK politicians.
OK. Well, look, Rishi Sunak has had mixed success with his 5 pledges, but at least he has kept one promise.
So look, my working assumption is we'll have a general election in the second half of this year, and in the meantime, I've got lots that I want to get on with. I said in January, my working assumption is that the election will be in the second half of the year. I've said what I've said about an election multiple times before. My working assumption is for an election in the second half of the year. Spoiler alert, there is going to be a general election in the second half of this year.
Well, it is in the second half of this year. Is the timing right, Mark?
Well, I mean, as I was saying at the top of the show, Patrick, I think it probably would have been better to wait till November, but probably also wouldn't have made much difference. It would have required something big to come along in the meantime. It is in the second half of next year by 4 days, right? I mean, actually a bit less than that, because February's a short month. He's kept his promise by 72 hours. Otherwise, it would have been in the early part of the year. I'm not too sure he's got the timing right. But look, what's going to happen? You were brilliant at asking Jonathan Reynolds to recount the 6 pledges. Believe me, in a couple of weeks' time, they will be earworming in your head. You will be bored of them over and over again. This is what's going to happen. The Labour Party is going to try and essentially bore people into submission, say virtually nothing, and hope that disillusionment with the Conservatives is sufficient to get them over the line. That's their strategy. The Conservatives have got to lay a glove on the Labour Party, which they have not done a very good job in recent weeks and months, and to sort of have some fear about what a change of government might bring about. That's what we're going to see for the next 44 days. I think the gap will close from the polls today. I really do think it will.
Let's just remember, the viewers will remember, and they know this, that a lot of our economic worries and our troubles are because of COVID. Now, during COVID, our government became all authoritarian. They started shutting down businesses, telling us to stay at home. That has caused a lot of our problems. One government minister said to me, admitted to me last year, we went too far. And fair enough. But Labour wanted harder, longer lockdowns. Labour would have punished us as people far worse during COVID. So again, I won't be voting for either. But how bad is it going to get under a Labour government?
All right, well, I'll tell you what, Rebecca, what I'll do is I'm going to read out Keir Starmer's 6 pledges now. We'll just get your take on them, pick them through them, all of that stuff. So we've got Sir Keir Starmer's 6 pledges, unveiled last week: deliver economic stability, cut NHS waiting times, launch a new border security command, set up Great British Energy, and crack down on antisocial behaviour, and recruit 6,500 teachers. Is there a concern that over the next 6 weeks he's going to have to flesh this stuff out and we're going to have to see a lot more policy on a lot more things, that the Labour Party gets picked apart in a way that they've not done so far because they've not really been clear on things?
I don't think so, because I think when Jonathan was talking before, he extrapolated very compellingly, and stuff like the 6,500 teachers, they've costed it out, and they believe that will come from VAT from private schools. Now, it's actually difficult to tell how many people will actually take their children out of private school.
You're
for
sitting
instance,
next to one.
might I finish a sentence just for once this evening?
Okay, come on.
I, for instance, would have sent my child possibly to private school, possibly, but under these plans, I wouldn't. Under a Labour government, I wouldn't, and I wouldn't need to. So I think there are more people whose children won't start it. So that will take a bit longer. But obviously, lots of parents don't want to disrupt their children's education. Everybody's first priority is their children's enjoyment of their education, totally. So if you go through, they can explain how they're going to cost these things out, and it does seem to make sense. Obviously, some of it is guesswork because they're not in power yet, but it does seem compelling at the moment.
Yeah, no, look, I'm just having this fed through to me here. Now, just a reminder for you that about 20 minutes ago, we brought you that breaking news from our political editor, Christopher Hope, which is that apparently there is a plot by some Conservative MPs, disgruntled Conservative MPs, to try to stop this general election by submitting enough letters of no confidence into the Prime Minister. I have another piece of information to bring you now, and it's on something slightly different, but it is, of course, election-related. This is what's just been reported right now, this minute, in the Times. Rishi Sunak will challenge Sir Keir Starmer to as many TV debates as possible over the course of the election campaign. No decision has been made on the number and the format of these debates, but both parties have privately agreed in principle to participate. I'll carry on through this. The Tories are keener than Labour for several debates, apparently, largely because they are behind in the polls, so they have more to gain, and they believe that Sunak will outperform Starmer. Labour wants to limit the number of debates to 1 or 2, and will probably insist that they are head-to-head events rather than including other party leaders. I think this is a fascinating little snippet of information that's coming out now. This is looking like the format of the TV debates over the course of the next 6 weeks. Labour apparently want just 1 or 2. They want them to be head-to-head. The Tories seem to be saying, we'll just do as many as possible all the time. Mark?
Well, as many as possible. I suppose you could do 3 a day, right? You could do 100 or more. You're quite right there. The reading here would be, generally speaking, in all elections, in all countries, if you're a long way ahead, you don't want to take risks. That's what I've said Labour will do for the next 44 days. They will try to get through these 7 weeks without saying anything, basically. From Sunak's point of view, he's decided to spin the wheel on going early. He wants to spin the wheel as many times as possible. I think he might do quite well in those debates. And you know, because, going back to Rebecca's earlier point, because he's starting from a low base. So I'd expect there to be more than 2, by the way. The interesting thing is, how can they keep out all of the minor parties? I mean, I don't think any other party is consistently polling.
Well, they don't want to be in a platform with Nigel Farage.
No, they sure don't.
That's the thing.
And no other party, I think, is polling consistently more than about 11%, so they might be able to get away with that as well. There'll probably be a minor party debate for broadcasters. But if I was running the Conservative comms machine, I'd be trying to go for 6 debates and hoping I could get 3 or 4.
I would say I think there's a mistake on 2 fronts. One is that on 6 you lose your viewership very, very quickly because it will be mostly the same stuff. You want event television and you want to really smash it once, maybe twice. But also, Keir Starmer is a very, very sharp legal mind. This is what he did for a living for years. He was a prosecutor. So I think the idea that he wouldn't be good in a debate might be misplaced. And I think he is more limited at PMQs. I think you might find him very good.
But the point with Rebecca is not so much the nerds like me who will watch every minute of every debate.
Yeah.
It's whether, and you might be right, perhaps Starmer will not make a single error, but were he to drop the ball, you get that
one
clip
bad
over and over again, even if nobody watches.
For me, I think it's obvious. The bad stuff about the Tories is already baked in. People have made their minds up what's bad about the Tories. Labour have been very quiet on certain things, and if they get exposed on TV, on immigration, on the gender nonsense, it could blow up to a huge audience.
Well, I think the foreign policy thing as well. I'll be honest with you. I really do think that the foreign policy thing, especially when it comes to what's going on in Israel at the moment, whether or not Labour is seen to be caving into the quotes-unquote Muslim vote, the pro-Palestine law, it was really interesting actually that one of the key figures behind the Muslim vote, and when I say that I mean literally the organisation called themuslimvote.co.uk. As soon as Keir Starmer came out and did his speech. They quote tweeted it, and above that it said the Muslim vote starts now. Let me just put these to you. So these are Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges. We're talking about that line that's just come out right now, which is that apparently Rishi Sunak wants as many TV debates as possible. Here are his 5 pledges: halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists, stop the boats. Adam, has he done any of those things that we're seeing on our screen now for you?
Let's just remind the viewers that halving inflation is nothing to do with what this government has done. That's external markets, that's supply chains. That's not what the government's done, so we can't take credit for that. Growing the economy, no, he's failed. Debt falling, I'm not sure on the numbers. Waiting lists have got worse.
Yep.
And small boats, it's rubbed in our faces every day. Illegal immigrants are coming over here and gaining our system. Will it get worse under Labour? Probably, yes. Have the Tories done anything about it? No.
OK. All right, now look, it really was a tale of 2 election speeches. All right, let's just remind ourselves of a couple of things. Here was a absolutely drenched to the bone Rishi Sunak outside 10 Downing Street earlier today.
Now, I cannot and will not claim that we have got everything right. No government should. But I am proud of what we have achieved together, the bold actions we have taken, and I'm confident about what we can do in the future.
Look, I'm sorry, but if you're going to call the election on the steps of Downing Street and it's absolutely throwing it down, get an umbrella, get a canopy. If you can't organise that, you're bang in trouble, or maybe do it inside, dare I say it, a little bit like Sir Keir Starmer, who was standing in front of a podium that spelled one word: change.
A rejection of the gesture politics you will see in this campaign, I have no doubt, from the Tories and the SNP. I'm well aware of the cynicism people hold towards politicians at the moment. Service of our country is the reason and the only reason why I am standing here now asking for your vote.
OK, so joining me now is the Conservative MP for Morley and Outwood. It is Dame Andrea Jenkins. Dame Andrea, thank you very much. The breaking news that we are getting here at GB News from our political editor is that there is a coup taking place, an attempt by Conservative MPs to stop this general election. Is that true?
I'm not sure, to be honest, Patrick. I haven't had these conversations, not for a few weeks myself. I think it's too late now. I mean, look, I put my letter in November. As you know, I announced it on your show, actually, Patrick, and I said then, come on, get your letters in. I think they've left it too late. I mean, how, as Mark just said, how the heck can you change leader when the election's called? I mean, Rishi has been very clever, wasn't he? The protocol normally is that you announce an election like Boris did, and then you go to the king, but he did it the other way around. So before the letters went in.
So that's a really fascinating point. So Rishi Sunak went to the king before he announced the election, you think, to make sure... Let's bring the tweet up that we've got here from Christopher Hope, all right? Some furious Conservative MPs are tonight working on a plot to call off the general election by replacing Rishi Sunak as leader before Parliament has been dissolved. He believes several more letters of no confidence have been submitted. So he went to the king, you think, before announcing it, deliberately to try to stop his own MPs from ousting him. I mean, what a way to start an election campaign.
I mean, I can't guarantee that, but, I mean, that's certainly one way to do it, isn't it? But I think now, Patrick, we've got to take the fight to Labour. I'm seriously worried about a Labour government. I think this is an election of a generation. It's the most important election of a generation, this. And I'm going to fight tooth and nail to stop a Starmer-led Labour government because, look, we've seen he's a man who kneels. He's the man who is so wokey. He doesn't know what a woman is trying to get Corbyn into number 10, like you've said. And look how he bowed to the pro-Palestinian mob and put pressure on the Speaker. I mean, I was bobbing in PMQs today, Patrick. I didn't get in, unfortunately, and I was going to ask a question on this. We've seen what's happened today with Ireland, with Spain and Norway. And I wanted to say to the Prime Minister, can we make sure that Britain will never bow to terrorism? But I don't think we can guarantee that with a Starmer-led Labour government.
What do you make of the way that Rishi Sunak decided to actually announce this election today, then? I mean, you know, does it fill you with confidence for what lies ahead? Why do you think he went to do it today? Some people are saying, well, you know, inflation's at its lowest level pretty much for 3 years. We've got the visa-dependent numbers. They are down. No doubt net migration will be lower than it was this time last year, although it couldn't get too much higher, could it? So, you know, there are some positives. You're going to have to go out and campaign for this guy, are you going to?
I'm going to campaign for common sense conservatism, Patrick, as I do in every election. Now, I personally wouldn't have gone now. I've even said to the Prime Minister myself, I met with him recently, and I said, we need a major war cabinet reshuffle, get some red meat, true conservatives in there. Let's get, you know, a true conservative as Deputy Prime Minister, and then let's have some true conservative policies. And let's lower taxes further in the autumn statement, then have an election.
But let's have a little look, shall we, Demetri? If you're all right, just stay with me on the line. I'm gonna have a quick chat with you about this, and then I'm going to go to my panel on it, because I'm keen to get their views as well. So there is a massive issue with this crossover in the country at the moment with the hard left, the pro-Palestine lot as well, and where Labour are with that. OK, so this could potentially be Labour's reform moment. And here are some of the Labour MPs in seats with a large Muslim population who are being targeted because of their abstentions on ceasefire votes. Now, let's keep this on the screen. We've got Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting, we've got Shadow Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth, Shadow Business Minister Rationale Ali. This could be a problem, could it not, Dame Andrea, for the Labour Party? This is something that the Tories are going to have to emphasise, isn't it?
This could be a problem. It is a problem for the Labour Party. As I said, look how he bowed to the mob and put pressure on the Speaker. That was unprecedented. Just shows you where his heart is. And as is being called in the media, has been called on GBNews, slippery starmer, he is. And the whole slogan of change, but not all change is good change, Patrick. And I believe a Starmer-led Labour government will not be good change for our country. We've seen the stuff going on in Scotland, what went on in Scotland with the gender stuff. And I think we'll see it here, Patrick.
You think you'll
I seriously fear a Labour-led government.
OK, and what is the thing you fear most?
I fear, I think the Prime Minister's come out strong on the sex education stuff, the whole trans stuff and transitioning for children. I fear that. Bowing down to the pro-Palestinian lobby and terrorism, I feel that. I also fear freedom of speech. We've seen over the years and the institutions, we've got decades it being infringed on, and it's going to get worse under Labour. Don't forget that Starmer was a human rights lawyer who has actually defended criminals from abroad to stop them being deported. Now, let's not forget his record on that, Patrick.
OK, look, Dame Andrea, thank you very, very much. That's Dame Andrea Jenkins there, the Conservative MP, who is at least putting forward a vision of what she thinks a Labour government would look like versus what a Tory government could look like. Now, it is just gone 10:30. It's 32 minutes past 10. And I have got the very first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Let's see how they've dealt with this general election announcement, shall we? Here is the Daily Telegraph. So if we have a look at this now, Sunak gambles on Snap poll. Things can only get wetter, they say, plus a massive picture of Rishi Sunak there, getting absolutely soaked to the bone. Let's go to the Daily Mail. OK, we've got the Daily Mail front page here. Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future, they say. Amid Tory jitters over his shock timing and an oh-so-British rain-soaked speech, Rishi seizes the initiative and says that voters must decide between two very different visions. I think I've got The Guardian, have I, for you as well? There we go, that's The Guardian. We've got Sunak's big gamble. And again, there's that picture of him right outside Downing Street in the driving rain. OK, well, look, hey, what a time. What a time for Rishi Sunak to call a general election. The Tories seem to think it can improve their chances at the ballot box, but All the polling companies seem to have Labour comfortably leading the Tories by up to 27 points. That's according to YouGov. And the very latest polls from Savanta also makes for interesting reading, OK? So here are the latest polls. Labour on 43%, the Tories on 26%, the Lib Dems on 10%, Reform on 9%, the Greens on 5% and the SNP on 3%. Their predictions for that election show that Labour essentially are winning a landslide there. But a majority of 236 is what Labour would have. OK, so it would be 443 Labour MPs in total compared to the Conservatives' 124. And we might as well forget about the rest for now, hadn't we, really? We welcome one of Britain's best-known and most respected political pollsters is Joe Twyman, who's the co-founder and director at Delta Poll. Joe, thank you very much. Predict the election for me, please.
Well, it's going to be on the 4th of July. I don't know if that's come up. But what will actually happen? Well, as you and I have discussed on many occasions, Patrick, polls are only ever a snapshot of public opinion at the moment. And at the moment, things look very bad for the Conservatives. And Delta Poll's latest survey for Monday, Labour have a 22-point lead. Good enough, as you said, on the other polling as well, for a landslide majority. But it's the long-term trends here that are really important. The Conservatives have not been ahead in any published poll by Delta Poll or otherwise since the 6th of December 2021. And Labour have had a double-digit lead in every single poll since the 26th of September 2022. These are long-standing trends. And when you look beyond voting intention, you see just the trouble that the Conservatives are in. On leadership, Keir Starmer is nearly 30 points ahead of Rishi Sunak on who's doing the best job. And on the economy, this all-important issue for so many people, the Conservatives are in dire circumstances and indeed have been now going right the way back to June 2023.
Before we get stuck into a little bit about what you mentioned there when it comes to the specifics of the head-to-heads on the leaders and maybe some key topics as well, who's doing well on immigration, the economy, I just want to talk about the actual timing of this election. You alluded to it there. I believe we've got school holidays at play here, I think, in some areas anyway of the country. Yeah. I think, yeah. And we've got the Euros. We've got the Euros. So there's a lot going on here. How is that timing going to affect the turnout? People on holidays, good grief, it's all going on.
Yeah, well, I mean, various people will have booked holidays and won't be here to vote, but they can, of course, arrange postal votes and proxies and so on and so forth. But will any of this have an impact on the overall result? I think it's very unlikely. But as for why call the election for the 4th of July, well, I guess that's the question that Rishi Sunak has to answer. And indeed, he offered no explanation in his speech on the steps of Downing Street today. Of course, the Prime Minister calls the general election when they think things will not get any better. And presumably the indication to Rishi Sunak is that both from a public opinion point of view and also perhaps from an internal Conservative Party point of view, he may feel that this is the best he can manage. It might not be the best or the most convenient time for an election, but it may turn out from his perspective to be the least worst.
OK, now, let's talk about some of the quotes-unquote fringe parties here. I have got a little bit of a clip from Sir Ed Davey from the Liberal Democrats.
Across the country, people are crying out for change, and this election is the chance to make that happen. This government is out of touch. It's out of excuses. And it's out of time. Yes! And it's time to get this Conservative government out of office.
Just say, Joe, sorry to do this again, but I can't just say, if people listen very closely to the start of this clip, it does sound a little bit like Sir Ed Davey about to get attacked by a load of Apache Indians. Anyway, how's he going to do with the election?
Well, the Lib Dems at the moment are on 10% in the polls, which is not great and indeed pretty much where they were at the last election. But they think, and indeed with some justification believe, that they can target the kind of constituencies that the Conservatives have held but have struggled to hold on to in by-elections, where those constituencies have lent more towards the centre or indeed even the left of the political spectrum, and particularly in those constituencies that lean towards Remain in the Brexit referendum. So if you think of those areas in the southwest, for instance, where David Cameron was ruthlessly efficient in 2015 in sweeping across those areas and winning for the Conservatives, the Lib Dems will be trying very hard in those areas, along with certain areas of London, to win back those kind of seats and build up the kind of presence that they haven't had in the House of Commons for many years now.
Now, do reform for me. Again, the other news this evening is that apparently Nigel Farage is sleeping on the idea that he might stand, and we are expecting some kind of announcement from Reform, which we will bring to you live here on GB News at 11 a.m. tomorrow. So set your timers, set your reminders on your phones, everybody watching and listening to this right now. How well will Reform do? How well will Reform do if Nigel does stand?
Well, it depends how you define how well. I think it's very unlikely that Reform will win any individual seats. Even if Nigel Farage stands, I think it's very difficult for them to win any individual constituencies. There is no obvious area where they should do particularly well, or at least well enough to win. If you look at somewhere like Blackpool South, which of course had its by-election relatively recently, that is the kind of area that should be absolutely prime areas for Reform, given the demographics and the voting background of that area. And yet, though Reform did well compared to the Conservatives, Labour won by some distance, and I think that they may struggle in similar circumstances across the country, assuming, of course, that they can get the kind of candidates that they need in enough seats.
Joe, look, thank you very, very much. You're another man who I think I'm going to be talking to a heck of a lot over the course of the next 6 weeks, so good for you. Take care. It's Joe Twyman. There's the co-founder and director of Delta Poll. Let me just reintroduce to the frame our wonderful panel here. I've got Director of Popular Conservatives Mark Littlewood, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. The election has been announced on the for the 4th of July. But what will Nigel Farage do? This is what he told us here at GB News earlier.
Fight the election. As for what I do, I'll think about it overnight.
So that's no commitment either way.
No commitment either way for me at the moment. I will think about it overnight.
Do you think he'll do it, Mark?
I would have said over the last 2 or 3 weeks I expected him not to run. He's very interested. He's been very honest on GB News about this. I think he even said he's more interested in what's happening in America, where he's very close to Donald Trump. So I would have thought he was not going to run. I would still think, and just as we've heard from the pollster there, it's hard to see a seat he could win. He possibly could pull one off. If he ran himself and they put everything behind it, he might win a seat. I was leaning against him running, but here are 2 things that might be weighing with him. Our election is now surprisingly in July. The default was our election was almost going to be the next week after the US election.
Yeah.
So potentially that opens up a window for him. And the other thing, and I'm perhaps reading a bit too much into this, if he's not running, I'm a bit surprised that Reform UK have sort of announced an announcement for 11 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yes.
You usually announce these sort of things if you've got sort of something big to say rather than to say nothing's happening. But on balance, I still suspect he will not run.
Adam, what do you make of the idea that Nigel Farage could stand?
Let's not underestimate how good being on The Jungle was for Nigel. It opened up a new audience and showed a human side to Nigel. I believe he's probably more popular now than he's ever been. I mean, you mentioned Clacton, possible seat there, Clacton. If he could get a seat, then suddenly he's got some sort of influence within our parliament. I think it would be a good move for him to do it, and I think...
But you think he will?
Somewhere like Clacton would vote for him, I believe, and I've got relatives there.
What do you reckon, Rebecca, to this Nigel Farage potentially standing? Again, I'll just emphasise to you, we're expecting to hear from Reform at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Nigel said that he was going to sleep on it, and we'll find out.
I mean, I would have put him in the Lords years ago because I think that would have calmed him down, given him some status, wouldn't have been a problem. Whoever didn't is an idiot. I think the issue of being an MP is that it's very hard work. You actually have to show up every day. It's really quite time-consuming. And if he wants to be in America, schmoozing, he's a very charming, very well-liked man who likes socialising and having some freedom. It's actually not a fun job. I think he might not enjoy it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I thought that if it was November, Rishi. I thought actually that was one of the reasons why Rishi Sunak would do it in November, because it would make Nigel Farage choose between campaigning in rainy market towns around the north of England, or let's be honest with you, having a great time in America with the Don.
Yep.
And I thought that would give him a very difficult opportunity. And now he's made his mind up for him, hasn't he? I don't know what Nigel's going to do. I've got no idea. I'm not sure at this moment in time if Nigel knows what he's going to do, but we will find out very, very shortly on GB News. Look, I'm just going to emphasise this. This is going to be a key driving factor. We talked about reform there. Let's talk about it from the other side when it comes to the left in Labour. Some of those Labour MPs, let me remind you, with large Muslim populations in their seats, who are going to be absolutely battered by candidates, independent candidates, or Workers' Party of Britain candidates, who are mad at them over Gaza. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting, Shadow Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth, Shadow Business Minister Rationale Ali. I think this could well be a big problem for Labour, Mark.
Yeah, I think you're right on this. And we obviously saw the first signs of it in the Rochdale by-election, right? I mean, all sorts of things went wrong for Labour and they dropped their own candidate. I'm not suggesting they're going to drop Wes Streeting from Ilford or anything like that. But it's unlikely, if the polls are right, that this will make a decisive difference to who forms the next government. But if you were to look a bit longer term, I think on their left flank, if they are in government, they're going to have a huge problem.
They've got a problem. OK, Rebecca, your views on this?
I'm increasingly of the opinion that I'm not sure you should be able to have political parties that are based around religion, whatever the religion is. I feel very weird about the idea that you have a candidate who is mandated by their faith, managing a group of people who live in their constituency who don't subscribe to that faith. And it feels really uncomfortable to me. So I think there's a conversation to be had about whether that's appropriate, full stop, from any faith. I think it might be cleaner if none of them can.
Yeah, but I mean, they are, though. This is the thing.
But that concerns me because some of the things that I particularly really care about, like women's rights, are not necessarily in line with some very...
Party, I think, much attracts Muslim votes is not specific.
No, it's not the Muslim vote, which is confusing terminology.
Yes, it is.
But
yeah, there's a crossover there.
I think in terms of Labour and this issue, I would say all they're doing is respecting the ICC, and I think that's important. We need to respect the ICC. We need to have it.
Is there a big issue, Adam, for you about whether or not Labour now, some of the things that we've started to see in the last few weeks especially, whether or not Labour are caving in to this pro-Palestine group, many people would call it, I have called it actually, and I've got every right to call it because of some of the things I've seen with my own eyes, the pro-Palestine mob.
That they're angering people on all sides, I think, by their stance, the Labour Party. They want to try and please everyone, but they can't. Again, I think Rishi Sunak should really press him on this in the head-to-heads, and it would be very enlightening to the audience and to the voters what Keir Starmer actually believes and what they're going to do going forward.
But I think he believes in a two-state solution, which is generally regarded to be a fairly reasonable thing, and the 1968 boundary delineations, which, again, is generally regarded to be quite reasonable, no?
Well, the hope of the Conservatives, I think, and this has been reiterated to me by a number of strategists and senior Tory MPs, is that support for the Labour Party is a mile wide, but potentially only an inch deep. And from what's a very high level for the Labour Party at the moment, at the start of the election campaign, you might find little bits of it being chipped away at, some going off to left-wing Muslim groups, others deciding that they don't really trust the education policy because they want to send their kids to private school. And if it's true that it's a mile wide and only an inch deep, you might see little bits of it chipped away, 1% here, 0.5% there, 2% somewhere else.
And I take your point, but I think it's a really good sign about the Labour Party that they're not that they are sticking where they can to their integrity around. It would have been very easy for them to say, do you know what, we're not with Israel at all. That would have been easy for them, and it would have been popular with the people who'd naturally vote for them. And I'm glad they haven't done that because they purged anti-Semitism from the party for a reason, appropriately. We used to have a problem with it, now we honestly don't.
Lost 4 elections in a row. They're desperate to win this one.
He's saying it's a changed Labour Party, though. I wonder whether or not over the course of this campaign we are going to see the Tories trying to hammer them on whether or not they are going to come out and really shout about the idea that Jewish people now around the country do not feel safe to walk the streets in many cases.
Yeah, I've heard the same from Jewish taxi drivers and many people that they are scared to go into London of a weekend and that they could now never vote for Labour. Let's remember, Keir Starmer backed Jeremy Corbyn to be the Prime Minister of this country, knowing that there was a problem with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party.
And then he fixed it. I didn't vote for Jeremy Corbyn because of anti-Semitism, and I have no qualms voting for Keir Starmer.
I'll tell you what Keir Starmer will get right, and we heard from Jonathan Reynolds, of course, earlier in your show, Patrick. The shadow cabinet ministers will be on script and pretty crisp. keep your eye on slightly loony lefty Labour backbench.
Oh, yeah,
saying something
absolutely.
that's wholly off script.
Yeah.
I bet you that will make headline news more than once.
One thing that's not being brought up, could we have a resolution or some news in the Angela Rayner debacle as well in the coming
Possibly.
week? Could that,
being investigated.
could that affect a general election? Who knows?
Possibly.
I would think that the Tories want some sort of news to come out about that.
But we can't talk about it, can we? Because it's being investigated.
It's right. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, this is currently a bit of a sticky wicket. But someone who we were mentioning there, kind of slightly loony lefties, is this chap called... Now, I'm sure many of you will know about him, right? He's called Steve Bray. Now, this guy stands with a megaphone and tries to ruin a load of broadcasts and get his message out there. But today, OK, what we heard, really, was the bloke Steve Bray with a load of speakers outside Downing Street, ready to blast music at Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, as he made his announcement. And then, finally, eventually, the police decided to get involved. Here it is.
Are you proud of yourselves, boys and girls? Fascists! This is not law! This is not law! This is not law! A law was brought in specifically to do this to this man. There is a long established constitutional rule against particular law. Long established. This country has fallen to fascism.
Do you not find it absolutely remarkable that the Prime Minister decided to stand outside in the driving rain today and that no police provision was made for the fact that that chap was going to turn up and obviously, because he literally just basically lives on an island in the middle of the road outside there, was going to try to ruin it. And it just made me think, Mark, if the Prime Minister or his staff cannot sort out an umbrella and shutting up a bloke with a megaphone, then what chance have we got?
You have a very good point about Steve Bray. I mean, you called him a loony lefty. He actually ran for the Liberal Democrats at the last election. Not that I'm suggesting that doesn't mean he's a loony lefty. Here's the problem. Steve Bray's been a problem for years, not just today. And it is not freedom of speech to be able to drown out everybody else in the SW1 postcode area he wants to speak. It's breach of the peace. It's a
would you ban him? Would you ban him, Adam?
Repeated.
I would somehow sanction him that he can't do this, because let's remember, I've had a run-in with that man. Yeah, on Parliament Green during a protest. And, you know, I can't really say what I want to say on here, but he is a character. But can we imagine if someone like Tommy Robinson blared music, or one of his associates, or someone that was deemed far-right blared music during that? They would be dragged off and battened before we could say, you know, stop. Why do they let him have so much time and so much sort of...
Should be a restraining order.
The idea, Rebecca, that this bloke could turn... And you could see it coming a mile off. Whether or not it should have been allowed to happen, him drowning it out with the music if things could only get better. Or is it... There is a side of it that says this is something that's quintessentially unique about British politics.
He is annoying, absolutely. Yeah. I have to walk past him frequently. He irritates me. However, the thing that we always say about free speech is we have free speech because you can go and stand on Speaker's Corner and you can do whatever you like. And that is what he's doing. It's keeping him busy. He's got something to do. Leave him be.
Public nuisance.
OK, now, I've got a couple more of tomorrow's newspaper front pages for you. Let's do it. Here is the Daily Mirror. So, the Daily Mirror have gone for Drown and Out, what will potentially become quite an iconic image of a soaking wet Rishi Sunak on his way back into Downing Street after doing that election announcement in the rain. Here's the Times for you now. So the Times have gone for Sunak bets the House. Wow, OK, and that picture of him again there at Downing Street. PM calls snap election for July the 4th. Britain must choose its future. Country first, party second, vows Labour. The compare and contrast there between what they've said. I've also... yeah, well, there we go. So those are your front pages, all right? So those are all of your front pages. And the Starmer, the Keir Starmer thing, I think, was absolutely fascinating as well. Coming out, doing his speech. I don't know if we might be able to rope up a clip of that at some point as well. But, you know, him saying, look, I'm going to put party first. It's all about duty. It's all about whatever. Yeah. Do you think that the public are going to buy in that? Because his slogan there was just change, which actually normally plays quite well as a slogan.
Well, it plays well as a slogan when you've had one party in office for 14 years. But here is a drinking game that I would advise no GB News viewer to get involved in. Yeah. Do not play the drinking game of having a shot every time you see Keir Starmer next to a Union Jack. You will get drunk very quickly if you play that drinking game.
We've got a very quick clip here of some of the stuff that Keir Starmer was saying today.
Importantly of all, we do all this with a new spirit of service. Country first, party second.
OK, so, everybody, thank you very much for having tuned in for the whole entirety of this. If you have, what you will know is that we have had nearly 2 hours of first-class political analysis. And after 2 hours of first-class political analysis, it is time for something completely different. Full disclosure, we had already paid for this guest before Rishi Sunak called the election, but we thought, why not keep him and have him sing us out? I welcome the Elvis tribute act, Sal Bashir. Sal, thank you very much. The reason why we originally booked you is because we were going to do a segment on the Elvis family having to sell Gracelands to pay off a whopping great big debt.
But it's a
but
big
here we
rumour,
are.
we're not sure.
And so we thought we'd keep you on, all right? Now, Sunak's got the nation all shook up, hasn't he? But it's time for a little less conversation and a little more election, isn't it?
A little less conversation, a little bit more election, please.
Absolutely fantastic. And go on, I want to hear a little bit more from you, if that's all right. You are one of the country's best Elvis tribute acts. You are the best way that we wanted to end this show tonight.
I've been
so
doing one show after another lately, so I'll just try my best, you know. Love me tender, love me sweet, never let me go. You have made my life complete, and I love you so.
Fantastic! Hey, look, you are absolutely remarkable. You're a tremendous sport as well, and I just want to emphasise we decided that we wanted to get Sal on because they apparently are selling Gracelands. I mean, I don't know. Do you have any idea which way Elvis would vote at the general election, Sal?
Well, he was a very patriotic guy who loved Jesus. He was a churchgoer. He thoroughly believed in his fans. He believed in the people. So I think Elvis was very much with all colours and creeds of all shapes and sizes. He was a man of the people, and he truly loved his public, and that included anybody from whatever faith they were. And I think Elvis would have been very interested in the elections going on here, because there's been a seismic change in the last 20 or 30 years. I've never known so much bickering and so much caustic stuff going on in Parliament. I'm quite appalled with some of the words that have been employed over the last couple of years by all the major parties. And it just seems that we're living in really crazy times at the moment. And I just hope that the things that matter to the people, like the NHS, we need to protect the NHS. It's vital that we have that. We need to probably reform the NHS because a lot of money's been spent that shouldn't be spent. There's too much red tape. And we just need a little bit more rock and roll in Parliament.
Can I just say, this is some unbelievably astute political analysis from the Elvis tribute act that we've got on here. Sal, you are a legend. Just before I get going, can we just have one more? It is time for a little less conversation. What do we need a bit more of, I think?
A little less conversation, a bit more election, please.
Yes! Oh, you legend. Good eye.
You got it.
Well done, mate. Thank you very much, Sal. All right.
Thanks, Patrick. Thank you, guys.
There we go. Right, well, look, that's a few £100 that we literally cannot afford to lose here at GB News, so we have to get our money for it. So there we are. Guys, can I just say a massive thank you. It's been a huge show today. We've had it all from start to finish. It's a big day for Britain. It's going to be a big 6 weeks for Britain. Thank you very much. Headliners are on next for a much more insightful and detailed look at all of...
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. It's been a very wet day for many of us today, and the rain is going to continue for many parts as we go overnight. All this unsettled weather is in association with an area of low pressure that is gradually making its way northwestwards, but it's progressing pretty slowly. And the rain, as a result, is going to linger across many northern parts of the UK as we go through this evening and overnight. It's going to be heavy